Local Marshfield resident Michael J. Foy is a seasoned author who has written 18 books in the genres of sci-fi, noir, and mystery. Tiff Phillips invited Michael to the Open Here set to discuss his current book release, how his work has evolved over time, and what inspires him to put pen to paper.
I'm with Michael J. Foy. Welcome. So happy to have you on Open Here.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
So let's get started. Tell us about your background. You're kind of a world traveler of sorts. So where did you grow up?
You know, I love that you put it that way. But yeah, that's because of being born to Irish nomadic parents. And they bounced around from here, there, and everywhere. I was actually born in upstate New York. But within 4 years, my parents moved us to London, where we lived for a year. Then we moved back to Boston, where we lived till I was about 12. Then we moved to London again and Ireland, and then finally back to Boston, where I've lived ever since. The way that I got into what we're about to talk about here is I graduated Northeastern with an engineering degree, and that was inspired by my love of science fiction. So science fiction in general kind of made me think of the sciences and math to a certain degree too. And between that and more specifically Star Trek, that's kind of where I started this career or this phase of my life.
Star Trek, nice.
Yeah. Trekkie.
I love it. So where do you get your inspiration from? Are your characters and your plot lines based on actual events and people?
Well, I do a lot of daydreaming. And I used to get in trouble for that in school, but now I find it's a blessing. In terms of the plot lines, I do kind of a mashup of real people and events with events that I kind of imagine and put them together. So I'm always playing the what if story in my mind. And just to give you an example of that, my first book was titled Future Perfect. It was actually published 20 years ago. I did the what if about an amnesiac gunslinger wakes up in the Old West without his memory. Now that plot line, the amnesia plot line has been done to death, but I put a twist into it where I get my character, the main character, to remember things like cell phones and airplanes when he starts to get better and regain his memory. So
I love that. So what is your process? Every writer's got kind of a different way because everybody's brain works differently. What is your process for writing a book?
Right. It's funny, and this happens all the time. A scene will occur to me, and it happens without my even thinking about it. And once that occurs, I start writing things down. And in a lot of cases, the story kind of takes off by itself. Just as another example, and this is going to sound bizarre and complicated for a scene that appears whole cloth in my mind, but there's a short story I've written called Moonbeams and Their Military Applications. And the scene that occurred to me and kicked that short story off was a woman digging a hole while singing Tony Bennett's Fly Me to the Moon. And as the reader progresses in the story, they'll find that she's digging a hole to bury her ex-lover, who she's just brained with a shovel. She's killed him. And as the reader progresses even further, they'll realize she's on the moon. She's doing that. She's burying him in a crater.
Wow, that is a twist.
That's what I hope people will say, yes.
So you recently released a book in September. Can you tell us a bit? It's a mix of sci-fi and mystery, correct?
That's correct. It's actually a sequel to a book that I previously wrote called Roswell Meets Noir. And it does reintroduce two characters, Brett Kovac and Cade Cameron, that were introduced in that story. And what I do is, much in the tradition of the old-fashioned film noir movies, I tell it from their perspective. It's a first-person narrative, and they're kind of modeled after people like Philip Marlowe, Sam Spade, so those hard-boiled detectives. And I remember thinking that wouldn't it be cool if an old-timey private eye like that takes on a mystery that takes them out of their typical genre and into something paranormal. So in this case, alien visitations is the thing that brings them out of the normal. And you could probably guess that from the title of the new book, which is Private Eyes and UFO Lies.
Such a cool mashup of genres. I mean, because I've never seen noir and sci-fi put together like that.
It occurred to me that, they say that every story has been written and told. So I thought, well, what can I do that's a little different? And I always do the what if game, with situations and people and genres, and that gets me charged actually to write these things as well.
Right. So you have 18 books under your belt. That is a huge accomplishment. How does that make you feel?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
It's funny when you say that. It's hard to believe.
Yeah.
My first book, Future Perfect, was done 20 years ago, but it took me 13 years to write it.
Wow.
And that's because I just kept starting and stopping, and I had my day job as an engineer. But yeah, to hear that I've written 18 books is still. It boggles my mind, but thank you for noticing.
Yeah, a little pat on the back.
Thanks.
Over the course of those 18 books, how has your work evolved over time?
I'd like to think that it's gotten clearer, and I constantly work on making my writing as clear as possible. I hate it, and everybody probably does this when they're reading a book and they have to kind of reread a section to find out what is the author really trying to say. So over the years I've experimented with different voices and techniques, and I'm happy to say that my chief critics, namely my family, said that yes, I do well at relating a very clear narrative.
I love it. So what advice do you have for aspiring writers?
I'm going to start off with something silly. There was a character called Bret Hart many years ago. He was the champion of the World Wrestling Entertainment. And he once told an interviewer, you've got to want it every day. Writing is kind of like that because you need total dedication to the craft. And if you find yourself, and this might be a clue to anybody who's aspiring to be a writer, if you find yourself reading a book and wondering, boy, if I wrote that, I'd write it this way, that's a sign that you might be into it. And for me, at this stage, and I've been doing it a while now, I just find that I can't not write.
Right. I love that.
Yeah.
So how does writing personally fulfill you?
Well, actually, in two ways. When I'm in the middle of it, when I'm writing a book, I kind of live vicariously through my characters and live their adventures. And I find that life is much more interesting if you're looking at it through different perspectives. So that's the first way. And then after the book is published and people start reading it, when they come back to me and say, that was a great escapist kind of book and flight to places I've never been before, that's really what I love. That's my real true currency. It's really why I do it.
So what does the future hold for you?
Well, at the moment, I'm actually about 10% of the way through my next book. And like the current book, it's going to be local, but not in the way you think. My two detectives in the book that's out right now, Private Eyes and UFO Lies, are Marshfield-based, and they work around the South Shore. This book is going to be also South Shore-based, this new one. And it starts with a man being kidnapped, forcibly taken into the woods and abandoned. They injure him severely. Namely, they amputate his left hand. But he's still pretty confident that he can find his way back to civilization. And he starts to follow the path of a stream eastward, and figuring that if he can get to the ocean, he'll definitely come across a population center. So as he starts walking eastward, he starts to recognize more and more the landscape. But then he recognizes that, yes, that I know that landscape, but some of the man-made structures aren't there. And that's because not only did he get abandoned in the woods, he's abandoned in time. He's back in time 500 years. Pre-Columbian Indians surround him to confirm that hypothesis. So
you're just going to keep writing.
yes, I am. I've got an idea where that's going.
And we're going to keep reading. Thank you
Cool.
so much, Mike, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
friend. Thanks for stopping by. If you like this video by The Local Scene, share the love and give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe.